My name is Samantha Wilson. I'm 28 years old. And this morning, I woke up to find that my entire business savings, $90,000 I'd spent years building, was gone. Not stolen by a hacker or some faceless criminal halfway across the world. No, it was gone because of my parents. The worst part, I should have seen it coming. They say betrayal hurts most when it comes from someone you love. But this wasn't just betrayal. It was a theft wrapped in a birthday bow. As I stood in my kitchen, staring at my banking app, and that impossible balance, one thought kept repeating, how could they? Before I can continue my story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world in the comments below. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Growing up, we looked like the kind of family that belonged on a Christmas card. Colonial-style home in Matthews, North Carolina. Monogrammed dish towels. A golden retriever named Daisy, who never barked. My dad, Gary Wilson, used to coach Little League even after he retired from long-haul trucking. My mom, Catherine, served on the PTA and somehow made 3 kinds of casseroles with 2 hours' notice. People thought we were close, solid, respectable. But behind those clean-cut photos was a silent contract I never agreed to, that everything I earned, achieved, or built was the family's by default. Still, when I started saving aggressively 3 years ago, I did it for myself. I had a plan: launch Wilson Wealth Strategies, a firm that would help women reclaim their finances from controlling partners and family members. The irony isn't lost on me now. The money wasn't sitting in some idle checking account. It was in a high-yield business savings account, completely separate from my daily expenses. I logged in every morning. I knew that number by heart, $90, $217.34. That morning, it read $12,040.91. I refreshed the app again and again. I thought maybe it was some kind of glitch, a back-end bank error. But the transaction history was clear. A transfer of $78,176.43 had gone through at 11:44 p.m. the night before. It was labeled External Transfer Landmark Checking, an account I recognized immediately, because it belonged to my parents. For a few seconds, I just stood there, frozen coffee cup still in hand. Then my fingers went cold. Not from the cup, but from the realization. They had accessed my account, and they'd done it on my birthday, while I slept. I called Landmark's fraud department in a panic. I answered every security question, verified every login. But the rep was calm, too calm. She explained that the credentials used matched previous transfers I had personally made to that account. It didn't count as fraud. It'll be treated as a disputed transaction, she said. Not a theft. But it was a theft. And the more I thought about it, the more it hit me. Dad had been at my apartment last week. He'd asked to use my laptop just to check the weather. My Chrome browser, of course, auto-filled everything. Username, password. He didn't even have to ask. They didn't just take my money. They laughed while doing it. They say the South knows how to keep up appearances, and no one did that better than my mother. Catherine Wilson could host a garden party on a budget of $17 and make it look like Southern Living dropped by for a photo shoot. But beneath the pearls and Pinterest-perfect table spreads was a woman obsessed with control, especially when it came to money. Growing up in Matthews, our family played the role of the respectable middle-class suburban dream. Dad drove a second-hand Ford pickup, Mom clipped coupons like it was her calling, and we had Sunday dinners like it was a Hallmark tradition. But behind closed doors, money was never a tool, it was a weapon. From as early as I could remember, my mom would make statements like, "We can't afford that, Samantha. Your father's paycheck barely covers the mortgage." Even though I later found out he had a pension from his trucking company, they'd lecture me about the cost of my field trips, or why a birthday sleepover was a luxury we didn't need to entertain. Yet somehow we always had the latest smart TV or a new patio set for summer. It didn't make sense back then, but I learned quickly what I needed was expensive. What they wanted was justified. My needs were indulgent. Their wants were necessity. And I was the dependable one. The one who followed the rules. The girl who earned gold stars and scholarships and never asked questions. That false narrative followed me everywhere. I was the smart one, the practical one. I was the girl who balanced a checkbook before she had her driver's license. But no one saw the cost of that image. The hours I spent calculating how to stretch my babysitting money to cover school clothes so I wouldn't have to ask. The resentment that built every time Mom mentioned how tight things were, while her newest handbag still had the store tag dangling, they conditioned me early. You're only as good as what you contribute. And I contributed a lot. By the time I was 12, I was calculating tip percentages for our dinner checks. At 13, I was running garage sales and tracking every dollar. At 16, I got my first real job at Belk, not because I wanted spending money, but because the electricity had been cut off for the second time that year, and I overheard my parents arguing about bills. Still, no matter how much I helped, it was never framed as help. It was expected, not appreciated, not acknowledged, just assumed. Dad would say, that's what families do. We pitch in, but pitching in only ever went one way. When Jeremy needed braces, I gave up my summer tutoring money. When the roof leaked, my graduation checks vanished. But when I asked for $20 to join the school's coding camp, I was met with a frown and a lecture. Money doesn't grow on trees, sweetheart. I started to understand painfully and slowly that our family didn't run on love or loyalty. It ran on obligation and manipulation. And I was the golden child not because I was loved more, but because I gave more. So when I saw that $78,000 had disappeared into their account, it didn't come out of nowhere. It came from a lifetime of training. I had been groomed for this. What stunned me wasn't that they did it. It was that they didn't even ask. I still remember the crisp, crinkly feel of my first paycheck. 16 years old, working part-time at Belk in the women's accessories department. It was barely over $100 after taxes, but to me, it felt like a gold bar. I had earned it, folding scarves, refolding them, ringing up Sunday shoppers, who treated me like I wasn't worth the air they breathed. I held that envelope like it was proof I was becoming someone. Then I brought it home. Mom saw it in my hand before I could even slide off my shoes. "Let me cash that for you," she said, already pulling it from my fingers. The electric bill came in higher this month. I remember blinking at her, not resisting, not arguing, just confused. That confusion turned into a slow burn over the next few weeks when I saw my dad proudly show off a new fishing rod to his buddies. I knew how much that model cost. I'd stocked it at Belk. So the electric bill got paid, huh? It was the first time I realized that money I earned wasn't really mine. And it was also the first time I didn't say anything about it. That's the trap, isn't it? You don't fight it the first time because you're afraid to seem ungrateful. After that, every paycheck went straight into the family fund. If I protested, my dad would say, "You live under this roof, don't you?" As if earning my own money had somehow voided my right to keep it. I should have asked more questions, should have pushed back. But when you're 16 and your mom gives you that weary look like you've disappointed her deeply, it's easier to back down. Especially when every adult around you echoes the same message: family comes first. Even when you're the only one sacrificing. I didn't have a savings account back then. No one ever helped me set one up. What I had was a manila folder in my closet labeled Future with sticky notes tracking imaginary balances. I'd write things like senior trip 500, then cross it out 2 weeks later after giving Mom cash for groceries. By the time I got to UNC Chapel Hill, I was fluent in financial guilt. Scholarships paid for part of my tuition, and I worked at the campus library between classes and weekends at a coffee shop. I sent money home when I could because the water heater broke, or Jeremy's laptop crashed, or the insurance messed up Dad's prescription plan. That was the beginning of a decade-long pattern. My life always in service of theirs, and me always telling myself it was temporary. That once I graduated, once I got the right job, once I made enough, things would change. They never did. Instead, the asks got bigger, more frequent. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing it as help and started seeing it as tribute. It wasn't family support, it was financial extraction, and I had become the family's favorite ATM. By the time I was 25, I was working 60-hour weeks managing high-net-worth portfolios, yet eating instant ramen in my studio apartment because I'd wired $600 to help with property taxes. Still, I kept telling myself, once I launch my firm, once that money starts flowing into my future, I'll finally be free. And then on my 28th birthday, they took that dream too. The $90,000 I'd saved didn't come from windfalls or trust funds or lucky breaks. It came from hustle. Unsexy, invisible hustle. From early mornings, editing spreadsheets, and late nights, reconciling reports. From skipping vacations, declining brunches, turning down splurge weekends in Asheville, because I'm just trying to be smart with money right now. It came from sleeping in a too-hot apartment all summer because my window AC broke and I couldn't justify the cost to replace it. It came from taking on the messiest, most difficult clients at Fidelity Capital, the ones who made assistants cry and needed 15-minute hand-holding calls just to log into their portfolios, the ones no one else wanted. I took them all. I wasn't trying to be a martyr, I was building leverage. Every promotion I earned, every raise I negotiated, I rerouted that money directly into my business savings. I wasn't just hoarding it, I was shaping a future. Wilson Wealth Strategies was more than a plan. It was my escape hatch, my legacy, my proof that I could take everything I'd learned about budgeting manipulation, about giving too much, and help other women avoid the same. I'd run the numbers 100 times. The startup capital needed was $87,300 give or take. That included 6 months of rent for a sleek little office in South End business licensing tech subscriptions, insurance branding, and a cushion for my salary until client revenue stabilized. I had finally crossed that finish line. So on the night before my 28th birthday, I allowed myself to breathe. I took a long bath. I ordered Thai food. I sat on my balcony, looking out over the lights of uptown Charlotte, and thought, this is it. It's finally happening. What I didn't know was that downstairs, my dad had already walked into my apartment days earlier and found the key to everything. My laptop open, my password manager still active. He knew what to look for. He didn't ask. He didn't tell me they needed help. He just waited until I was sleeping, and then using my own credentials, he siphoned the funds I'd spent years compiling into the checking account he shared with my mother. When I saw that transfer the next morning, I couldn't breathe. The first call I made after the fraud department hung up on me was to Landmark Bank's branch in Matthews. I knew people there. I'd set up my first account at that very branch. Mark Gaines, one of the managers, picked up. He was the one who confirmed it. We reviewed the surveillance, Sam. Your father was captured on ATM camera last week during business hours. Same device the credentials were used from. Do you remember him being at your place? I remembered. He'd stopped by to drop off a piece of mail, asked to use the bathroom, chatted about some classic car show he wanted to go to. I had no reason to be suspicious. Until now, I stared at the ceiling that afternoon, lying flat on my back, shaking. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the trust. The years of doing everything right so I could one day have something that was mine, and watching it be taken by the very people who had told me I was selfish every time I said no. They didn't just steal my savings. They stole my shot. I drove to Matthews that evening, like a woman possessed every mile between Uptown and my parents' cul-de-sac, churning my stomach tighter. Their house looked exactly the same, geraniums blooming too brightly in pots by the porch, the American flag still perfectly aligned beside the doorframe. The SUV in the driveway, however, was new, shiny, black, and very much out of their tight budget. I didn't knock. The door was unlocked, something my mom always bragged about. We don't lock doors in this neighborhood, Sam. We trust our neighbors. Trust. What a joke. Inside, my mother was arranging a vase of lilies at the kitchen island. My father was reading the paper with a glass of iced tea sweating beside him. It was all so normal it felt staged. What did you do? I said, holding up my phone. My voice was shaking. The numbers on the screen trembled along with my hands. My mother looked up, lips pursed. Well, hello to you too. Happy birthday. I dropped the pretense. You transferred $78,000 out of my account. My business account. That was everything. My father folded his paper like I'd just accused him of leaving the garage door open. We needed to access those funds. It was urgent. Access, I blinked. That's what you're calling it now, accessing. We did what we had to do, he said calmly. Your brother needed surgery. The insurance wouldn't cover it. It's serious, Samantha. I froze. Jeremy, my brother. Sure, he'd mentioned not feeling great last month, but surgery. He hadn't said a word. I would have helped, I said, stunned. If it were real, if you had just asked. We knew you'd make a scene, my mother said, brushing a lily petal between her fingers. You're always so dramatic about your money." "My money? My dream? You used my laptop, didn't you?" I asked. "That day you dropped off the mail. You saw the login. You went in and took it." "We needed it more," Dad said, tone clipped. "You were going to spend all that on a gamble. Some boutique finance firm in a warehouse. That's not security, that's a fantasy." Their words didn't land like arguments. They landed like verdicts. Like they'd already judged me and found me guilty of being selfish. Just then the doorbell rang. I blinked, confused. And then the voices started filtering in from the front hallway. "Surprise, happy birthday. Sweetie, look who's turning 28. My entire extended family poured in, Aunt Teresa, Uncle Larry, cousins I hadn't seen in a year. They were holding balloons. A sheet cake with my name and frosting. My brother Jeremy followed last, looking around like he'd just walked into a funeral instead of a celebration. I stood rooted, shaking mascara, smudging my cheeks. Jeremy looked at me. "Sam, what's going on?" Before I could say a word, Dad put an arm around my shoulders. "Your sister's just upset we used some funds to cover your medical bills." Jeremy's eyebrows shot up. "What bills?" My mom chimed in smoothly. "The hospital just processed it last week. Insurance denied part of it." Jeremy looked straight at me. "I paid a $30 copay for a GI consult." That's it. No surgery, no denial. Silence, absolute damning silence. I watched their lie collapse in real time, my mother's face pinched, as if the flowers had suddenly turned toxic. Dad tried to pivot. "There must be a mix-up. Doesn't matter now. We're here to celebrate." "No," I said, backing away. "You're here to distract, to surround me with noise so I won't make a scene." "But your cake's in the fridge," my mom said, like that was supposed to fix everything. "You stole my dream," I whispered. "A cake isn't going to fix that." I left them standing there in that kitchen, with their fake smiles and even faker excuses. Uncle Larry muttered something about how I was too emotional, but I didn't look back. I drove without a destination, Charlotte's skyline flickering in and out of view through my tears. The sun had dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across the road. My GPS stayed silent. I didn't need directions. I just needed air. Space. Something that didn't smell like lilies and lies. I ended up parked at Freedom Park, tucked into a spot by the lake. I sat with the engine off hands, gripping the steering wheel until the leather left imprints on my palms. My phone buzzed with texts from Monica, from Jeremy, from Mom. I ignored them all. Instead, I scrolled through my photo roll until I found a picture I'd taken months ago of a document I hadn't meant to keep, a blurry shot of an old mortgage statement I found in my parents' filing cabinet during a visit. I'd taken it out of curiosity, not suspicion. But now, I zoomed in, heart pounding. There, in faint black ink, was my name, Samantha Lynn Wilson, listed as a co-borrower. My mouth went dry. I remembered the day they asked me to sign something when I was 18. I'd just started college. Dad said it was just a formality. Something about needing my name as a reference while they refinanced the house. I barely read the paperwork. I was too focused on my midterms and making the last bus back to campus. But I hadn't signed a reference sheet. I had signed onto a mortgage. I was legally responsible for that house. My name wasn't on the deed, but it was on the debt. I texted a photo of the document to Erica Chen, my old law school friend, who now specialized in real estate. "Hey, is this what I think it is?" I wrote. She replied 5 minutes later. "Yep, you're a co-borrower. That's why it showed up on your credit report." I hadn't checked my report in months. I'd been so focused on building my business fund, I hadn't thought to monitor for that kind of financial landmine. Erica called me immediately. "Sam, this is serious. If they default, your credit tanks. But here's the thing, you also have rights. You can communicate with the lender. You might even be able to leverage this." Leverage it how I asked. If they're behind and you're in good standing, the bank might work with you. You could force a restructuring. Or, in a worst-case scenario, initiate a forced sale. A forced sale! I sat with those words for a while, letting them echo in the empty car. I didn't want their house. I didn't want revenge. But I did want accountability. Because this wasn't just about theft anymore. It was about years of being lied to, used, guilted into silence. I hadn't just lost $78,000. I'd lost a decade to a narrative that told me I owed them everything because they'd raised me. I drove back to my apartment, in a fog, eyes, gritty body aching. That night, I pulled every piece of paperwork I had from my file cabinet, bank statements, transfer logs, tax forms, texts, emails. I organized it into 3 folders: proof of transfer, evidence of spending, mortgage documents. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a case file, and I was about to build the most airtight financial argument of my life. The next morning, I logged into the joint online portal tied to my childhood savings account, an account my parents never removed me from. I hadn't used it in years, but the credentials still worked. They probably assumed I'd forgotten it existed. I hadn't. Inside that portal, their checking account balance stared back at me, along with their transaction history. What I found made my stomach turn. The day after the transfer from my account hit their balance, there was a $34,000 payment to an auto dealership. The same dealership name was printed on the back of the shiny SUV in their driveway. A few lines down, $7, $200 to Southeastern Club Outfitters. Golf gear. Likely my dad's new custom clubs. $5,000 at Queen Street Luxury Interiors. My mom had mentioned a new living room set on Instagram just last week. $800 to Carolina Cruises. For a vacation they never mentioned. Nowhere was there a hospital bill. No insurance copay, no pharmacy, no out-of-pocket expenses for any surgery or urgent medical care for Jeremy. They hadn't just lied. They'd fabricated a crisis to justify gutting my future. I called Jeremy that afternoon. He picked up on the second ring. "Sis, I've been meaning to call. What the hell happened last night?" I didn't yell, didn't cry. I just asked calmly, "Did you have surgery? Did insurance deny anything?" "No," he said, clearly baffled. "I told you I had a couple tests for stomach pain, but it turned out to be reflux. I cut dairy. I'm fine." I told him everything. The stolen savings, the mortgage, the lie about his health, the SUV, the golf clubs, the fake emergency. There was a long pause. I could hear his breath hitch. "They said you were being selfish," he whispered. "That you wouldn't help unless they framed it as urgent." "They used you," I said softly. "They used your name to justify what they always intended to do." He went quiet again, then asked, "Can you send me what you found?" I did. He called back that night, his voice quieter, more grounded. "I didn't know," he said. "I'm so sorry. They told me for years you were always taken care of, that they covered your school, that you never struggled." I laughed sharp and hollow. They were taking my graduation money for textbooks while I skipped dinner to afford rent. We sat in silence for a bit. 2 siblings coming to terms with a version of childhood that was less family sitcom, more financial hostage situation. Then Jeremy asked the one question no one else had. "What are you going to do about it?" And I knew the answer, not out of spite, not out of vengeance, out of strategy. "I'm going to make them pay it back," I said, "every dollar. And if they don't..." I looked at the mortgage documents on my dining room table, the bank's overdue notices, the proof of delinquency. Then I take the house. I had the leverage. It felt strange to admit that colder than I liked, more transactional than I ever imagined needing to be with my own parents. But leverage is neutral. It only becomes cruel when used recklessly. I wasn't here to destroy. I was here to reclaim. I scheduled a meeting at my apartment for Tuesday at 7 p.m. I texted them both. "We need to talk about what happened. Please come alone." My mother replied immediately, "Finally coming to your senses. We'll bring dessert." The audacity of it like this was a normal dinner, like a pie would somehow patch over theft. I spent that afternoon preparing not a meal, but a strategy. I laid out 3 folders at the center of my dining table, each labeled in bold black letters. Transfer evidence, spending proof, mortgage responsibility. Each one held pristine tabbed copies of the supporting documents. A 4th folder sat beside them, a repayment contract drafted by Erica. The doorbell rang at 6:58, precise as ever. My mother walked in holding a cake box chocolate, my favorite. My father followed silently, his expression already defensive. "There's no food on the table," he noted, as if I'd committed a crime against hospitality. "I thought we'd talk first," I said. They sat. My mom folded her hands like she was waiting for a toast. Dad leaned back, arms crossed. I stayed standing. "This," I said, opening the first folder and sliding it across the table, "is the transaction record showing $78,176.43 transferred from my business savings account to your joint checking at 11:44 p.m. on my birthday, using my credentials. Dad's jaw twitched. My mother said nothing. This second folder I continued contains detailed records of what that money was spent on. The SUV in your driveway, golf equipment, cruise bookings, home decor. Not a single medical expense. I already told you Mom cut in we were under stress. We needed the funds urgently. You lied! I snapped, my voice rising. You used Jeremy's health as cover, and he confirmed there was no emergency. You used my dream as collateral for your convenience. Dad slammed his palm against the table. You wouldn't understand what it's like to worry about your child. I do understand, I shouted. I am your child and you robbed me. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. Then I placed the third folder in front of them. This is the mortgage you signed when I was 18. You told me it was a reference. It wasn't. You made me a co-borrower without explaining the consequences. You're 4 months behind on payments. Mom's face paled. Dad blinked hard. What do you want, he said. Cold, tired, defeated. I want my money back, I said. All of it. And if you don't repay me in full, I will exercise my legal rights as co-borrower to force a sale of the house. You'd leave us homeless, Mom hissed. No, I said calmly. You did. The moment you chose a cruise over my business, a handbag over my trust. I slid the final folder across the table. The repayment agreement. Monthly installments of $3,000 until the balance was returned. A clause stating that missed payments would trigger mortgage action. They didn't sign it that night, but 3 days later, the first $35,000 appeared in my business account memo line, settlement partial. The game had changed, and I wasn't playing defense anymore. The SUV was gone by the following Monday. So was the custom leather furniture, and according to Jeremy, the golf clubs, and a good portion of my mother's handbag collection. I didn't gloat. I didn't even reply to their increasingly curt emails confirming each repayment. I just logged each installment in my tracking sheet, watching the numbers tick back toward equilibrium. I'd recovered $35,000, enough to revise the dream. The sleek office in South End was out of reach for now. But that didn't mean the dream had to die. Just evolve. I found a listing for a small office suite in NoDa, Charlotte's Arts District. It was a retrofitted warehouse with exposed brick, mismatched furniture, and low rent. I walked the space with the leasing agent, feeling the quiet pull of starting fresh. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. It was mine. I signed the lease that afternoon. My mentor, Rachel Dawson, my boss at Fidelity, was the first person I told. We met over coffee, and I laid out my revised plan, a soft launch, a lean first year, and a hyper-specific focus on clients who'd experienced financial manipulation or control. Rachel read through my packet with sharp eyes and a slight smile. You're not just starting a firm, she said. You're creating a safe house for financial healing. Her words stayed with me. I scaled back every detail of the original plan. No glossy branding rollout, no outsourced marketing. I did it myself, nights and weekends, fueled by coffee and Google Sheets. I opened with 2 folding chairs, a Craigslist desk, and a refurbished laptop. But I also had my first referral within 2 weeks, a woman Rachel knew, whose divorce had left her with joint debt and no financial roadmap. Then came another, a woman fleeing a narcissistic business partner. Word spread not in a viral explosion, but like roots beneath the surface, slow, strong, deliberate. Wilson Wealth Strategies wasn't a symbol of revenge. It was a symbol of restoration. Jeremy came to visit the office one weekend. He brought pastries and helped me build a second IKEA desk. As we assembled pieces in silence, he looked around and said, "They think you're punishing them." "I'm not," I said. "I'm just done being punished for having boundaries." He nodded. "They miss you, you know." "I miss who I thought they were," I replied. "Not who they showed me they are." That distinction had become my compass. I wasn't waiting for apologies anymore. I wasn't waiting for them to transform. I was transforming. 3 months after that first repayment, the total was at $44,000. Every payment arrived on time. Not early, not late, no notes, no calls, just cold, consistent restitution. I built my client base slowly but intentionally. Each woman who walked through my office door brought a story that mirrored mine in slivers. Some were escaping controlling spouses, others manipulative business partners or enmeshed parents who still held their credit cards hostage. I listened, I strategized, and I helped them draw lines that no one had taught them to draw before. And in that tiny windowed space in NoDa, I began to rebuild something far more valuable than a business fund. I rebuilt myself. 1 year after I discovered the theft, the final payment hit my account. The reference line read simply, "Final installment, paid in full." No note, no apology, just a digital signal that the debt was closed. I stared at the screen for a while, the silence of the office surrounding me. There were no fireworks, no rush of satisfaction, just a strange weightless ache where rage used to sit. They had repaid every dollar, but they hadn't returned what truly mattered: trust, dignity, the years I spent believing their version of love meant sacrifice without limit. A few hours later, I received an email from my father. It was the first time he'd contacted me directly in months. "Samantha, the account is settled. Your mother and I would like to meet if you're willing. Let us know when you're free. Dad." No subject line, no warmth, no ownership. I didn't respond right away. I forwarded it to my therapist, Dr. Patel, instead. During our next session, I read it aloud. "I don't know what they want," I said. "Closure, redemption? Am I supposed to pretend the cake, the lies, the manipulation didn't happen?" Dr. Patel nodded gently. "What do you want, Samantha?" I didn't know, not entirely, but I knew what I didn't want. I didn't want a relationship built on silence and pressure and pretending. I didn't want more family dinners where I bit my tongue just to keep the peace. I wanted truth, acknowledgement, safety. "I want peace," I told her, "and I'm not sure they can give me that." So I wrote back, short, measured, firm. "Dad, thank you for honoring the repayment agreement. I appreciate the consistency. At this time, I'm not ready to meet. If that changes, I'll reach out on my own terms. Samantha." I expected a rebuttal. I got nothing. And that silence, it finally felt like closure. Jeremy still visits. We've made our own version of family, a relationship built on respect and transparency. He doesn't ask me to defend myself to them. And when they ask him questions about me, he redirects. He's no longer a pawn in their game. He's just my brother. Monica, Rachel, and even Erica have become pillars in my life. Chosen family. People who see boundaries not as rejection, but as protection. Wilson Wealth Strategies has grown. Slowly, but with purpose. My roster now includes survivors advocates and first-generation wealth builders, all of whom come to me not just for spreadsheets, but for space, for strategy, for strength. And every time I look up from my desk and see the stylized Phoenix logo on my wall, I remember the exact moment I stopped shrinking myself to fit a narrative I never wrote. That's what the stolen money gave me, in a twisted way, permission to burn it all down and rise again. I don't know if I'll ever meet my parents again, but I do know this: I don't need them to heal. I don't need them to approve. I reclaimed my name. I reclaimed my power. I reclaimed my future. And nothing, not even blood, gets to steal that again. Not all betrayals end with apologies. Sometimes justice comes in the form of boundaries, not reconciliation. My parents repaid what they took, but they never returned the parts of me. They dismissed the ambition, they undermined the dreams they laughed at, the voice they tried to drown. And that's okay, because I found something more valuable: the clarity to protect my peace, the courage to define family on my terms, and the strength to stand alone without feeling abandoned. Have you ever had to draw a hard boundary with someone you love? Did it free you or leave you wondering what might have been? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your story. If this resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear. They're not alone in reclaiming their power. You're not selfish for choosing yourself.